Hi, I'm Claire Williamson, an ex-litigator and the co-founder of Leading Minds. With 97% of lawyers complaining that stress is impacting their health, I think it's time that we speak about how challenging the pressures of the legal industry can be. So this podcast is a space where lawyers can discuss how they've overcome the challenges they face in their role and gone on to thrive within their career. Whether you're a trainee, a partner, or anyone in between, I really hope that this podcast will leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and with the confidence that you can make your mark on the legal industry. And today I'm really excited to join my absolute favourite person on LinkedIn, Annie Joseph. So Annie is a fourth seat trainee at Foot Anstey, and she's soon to qualify into the family law department at a Southwest firm. And today Annie is speaking about something that's really close to my heart, which is the overlap between your personal and professional life. So thank you so much for joining me today, Annie.
Thank you for having me. I've been excited for this one.
Good.
And it's coming out on my birthday.
Oh, is it? Amazing.
Yeah.
Did not know this, so that's very exciting as well. Happy birthday to you for this week. And I definitely want to speak to you about LinkedIn because you know I'm like your ultimate fan on LinkedIn. But first, I thought it might be really good for everyone who doesn't follow you on LinkedIn. By the way, you should. She's great. To give yourself an introduction and maybe where you studied and how you find yourself training at Foot Anstey as well.
Yeah, brilliant, of course. Yeah, so as you know, I'm at Foot Anstey at the moment. And I got to that because I studied at Exeter and London scared me. No offence to everyone who's in London. So I thought I like the Southwest, I like the vibe and being near the sea. So I decided to stay there. Didn't manage to get a training contract whilst I was still at uni, so I did a year of paralegaling in Bristol, and that's when I first became successful then at my assessment day. So I did the LPC in Bristol and then joined for Anstey in 2018. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, I love hearing as well about people who've had slightly alternative, kind of routes into the legal industry in terms of not that paralegal was particularly alternative, but not just going in my second year, I got my traineeship and then I joined.
Well, I think there's a real panic for students because I remember thinking, oh my God, I haven't got my training contract in my second year or my third year. Like, oh no. But for most people, I find actually that doesn't happen. It's actually a smaller proportion than you'd think that are successful at that stage, because looking back I had no idea what I was talking about when I was still at uni, and it wasn't until I had like, what is that? Like, I was talking about my job in Wetherspoons and they were sort of smiling but not really, even though I do actually think that is a good experience.
Yeah, definitely. Any experience,
yeah.
good experience. And I must say as well, actually, from doing this podcast, I think we've done maybe 15 episodes now, and there's not been one single person who has actually got, done their vacation scheme and then entered the legal industry that way. So that's really promising
for good.
Anyone, and especially during now with the current economic climate, probably people are really panicking, but I'm sure there's many people that can vouch for, it doesn't always go directly in the way that you'd intended, but you get there in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's actually really important to talk about the uncertainty that's going on as well, which is actually how I started to be more vocal on LinkedIn, because I found that like a lot of trainees and students were really worried about it, but everyone was too scared to sort of speak on it or to sort of say, actually, this is all a bit scary and uncertain and I'm not dealing with that. So that's why I kind of started posting to sort of start a dialogue around it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you have been a real voice on LinkedIn ever since. And I have no idea how we connected on LinkedIn, but what stood out for me was the fact that you were really you. Like, you're really funny, you're really honest, you're really engaging. Yeah, but it's phenomenal because obviously, LinkedIn is very much a professional network and I abide by the rules and you abide by the rules. But in terms of, like, for me, I always feel really reluctant to put anything that would be like in any shape or form showing my personality. And that's not even about like taking a picture of my dog or anything like that and tying that into my professional life, but it's just being really honest and open in a kind of professional yet personable manner, which I think you've absolutely nailed.
Yeah, I think lawyers particularly are very risk averse, aren't we? And the idea of putting yourself out there or potentially saying something dangerous. But I think you've got to really get it wrong, as in like spectacularly wrong, to land yourself in trouble. And I think unless you're saying something like radically offensive or obviously not okay, then you will be fine. So I've actually hosted some webinars on that, just trying to say to people, actually, it's okay to show a bit of personality and to be a bit authentic, and you're not going to get in trouble for having a view on things, so long as you know you're not racist or sexist or
In which
prejudiced.
case,
And
got to question yourself anyway.
yeah, exactly. Maybe you're in the wrong profession
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that, you know, it's a great example of that overlap between personal and professional life, isn't it? That yes, you are, applying for a job and you want people to see you as a professional individual,
Mhm.
but also in terms of, I think personally, finding a firm that works for you and that you work for them, it is good to show a bit of personality, surely, because then you know what you're kind of getting yourself into, and they know what they're getting their self into.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their best behavior on the application forms, you know?
Oh, definitely. And I find that law students particularly are always on their best behavior on sort of LinkedIn, like, and trainees as well. And I think one of my most popular posts on LinkedIn was talking about, like, yeah, those day in the life of a trainee blogs are great, fabulous, like it is a good job, but sometimes there are days where you question your self-worth, or you're having a really late night and you panicking, or you feel stupid because you've asked a bit of a dumb question. And I think it's important to talk about that, because otherwise I found that many trainees like myself were going through the process thinking, oh, am I the only one that feels like this sometimes? When actually, no, it's the whole 2 years are a massive learning curve. So yeah.
It almost
Um,
feels like a 2-year job interview as well, doesn't it? You're kind of like,
yeah,
no, this will be fine once I qualify, and then you qualify and realize you've got extra responsibility, and
yeah.
you're still in that kind of interview feeling.
I think that's it. I think that's why it's difficult for trainees to be themselves, because they've got this thing, whether real or perceived, that they've got to be on their best behaviour for the whole 2 years, or they might throw away the NQ job. And especially during these times, I mean, they're so few and far between that it's quite a scary place to be, I guess. But that's why I just wanted to be a bit more open and just sort of talk about these things, because I appreciate not everyone will, but if some people start to be, then it might open it up, or that's the idea anyway.
Yeah. And what have people's reaction been to you, apart from me just sending you like lots of messages every day, being like, hello, can I follow you around for the day?
I mean,
What people's reaction been?
overwhelmingly positive, and it's been good because I've been able to do a lot of sort of networking opportunities off the back of it, and feel like I'm helping, young students. Because if you come from a sort of working class or not affluent, not well connected background, I remember feeling like, oh God, like I don't have any connections. And I went to uni where it felt like everyone's dad played golf with a partner. So I found that's been really good. I mean, obviously you will get the one or two individuals who'll be like, LinkedIn is for business and they don't like all of your personal posts, but that's life anyway. I kind of think you're never going to be everyone's cup of tea,
Yeah.
um, and that's whether you're in person or via social media. But I can't really think of many occasions where that's happened. It's mostly been really positive, and yeah, so, and it helped me to get my job using LinkedIn as well, which was great. So I'm a big sort of believer of we should all be on LinkedIn or using it more positively, definitely.
Yeah, I do think that there's a real temptation as a trainee or a junior member of the team to be kind of sharing, your company's like tax article
Yeah,
updates, or, and not sharing your views. And
yeah.
yeah, it's,
That's what I did myself, to be honest, until a few months ago. It was just sort of sharing things that the firm had written and not even wanting to really comment on it, just sort of sharing the link. And I don't think you're ever going to get much out of LinkedIn if that's the only way you use it, is by talking to people, commenting on posts, putting yourself out there, that I think you can make a bit of a difference or make a bit of a name for yourself. But
yeah.
yeah, I can see why they do it though, because that is safe, isn't it? To just, oh, here's something somewhere else wrote. There we go.
Yeah, definitely. And you've produced quite a lot of content for LinkedIn as well, in terms of, I mean, reading your posts, they definitely are well thought through. It's not that you've just kind of ranted off like, oh, do you know what's on my mind today? I'm going to do this. And I must say as well that all of your stuff, although we're saying there's personality to it, it's always highly professional as well. So I just want to add that in for everyone who's like,
Yeah.
what's she posting?
Yeah, I know.
No dog pictures, I'm afraid. That would only make me like you
No.
more. But yeah, you know, you can tell you've really thought it out and that you've, you know, you've kind of put yourself into it. So, you know, does it take you a lot of time, or like, are you structured that you kind of feel you have to post every day, or is it just?
No, I mean, I'm glad it doesn't come across of this is what's on my mind, because sometimes it is sort of, I'll just have an idea, but I won't post it straight away. I'll have an idea and I'll sort of sit on it and think about it. Yeah, try and craft something that I hope is useful. I guess the other reason it's been quite good for me is because I decided I wanted to qualify into family. I kind of felt like there weren't many people making family very accessible. I mean, if you're going through divorce, it's quite confusing, and a lot of the articles out there were quite specialized and not very reader friendly. So I thought I'd start my own blog where I've tried to sort of comment on some issues in a sort of reader friendly way, I hope. So yeah, that was a good thing, that I had my own sort of, not niche, but a sort of topic I was interested in, as well as the legal career side that I like to talk about. And those are the two that I mainly sort of focus on. But yeah, sometimes I will have the odd personal post, for instance, about my dad, who I've talked to you about, and what I went through in my training with him. But I think that's just to sort of show that I am human too. So most of it's professional, but then I will have the occasional post where I think, actually, no, I'm going to talk about Annie today.
Yeah, yeah, no. I definitely want to speak about your dad in a second, but I just wanted to ask one quick question around about the LinkedIn side of things, because you said obviously you've got a blog and you're kind of making it more accessible to people. I will put my hand up and say, as a trainee, I would have felt that I didn't have the knowledge to actually do that. So what would you say to many people who are maybe feeling that just now, or feeling like they don't actually know what to write on LinkedIn? So sharing the company update is the safest option, or, you know, just not really knowing, like, what would you say to people that are kind of thinking that?
I think we all think that. I mean, I do. I post something and I'm like, oh, who really cares what I have to say? But then I'll get positive feedback and I'm like, oh, actually, some people did care, and that's great. But also the blog, I totally get it. As a trainee, you always feel like you don't know very much, but actually you do know a lot more than you think you do. You've been studying for 4 years, you've been training for, in my case, nearly 2. That's quite a lot of knowledge you'll have amassed in those 6 years. So yeah, I mean, I do think that if you are scared of dipping your toe in the water, sort of sharing posts can be a great way to start, but maybe just add a comment on it, or start a discussion, or ask for people's views. And I think that's sort of how you can start generating dialogue. Whereas if you just share the article with no text at all, then no one's really going to engage, because it's just, you know, there's no real conversation there. So yeah, I think my message is just to try and put yourself out there, and not to be afraid of doing it, because it is scary, but that's how you push yourself out of your comfort zone, isn't it?
And that's how you start to learn these additional skill sets, because very often, you know, the academic qualifications everyone else has. So how do you start differentiating yourself, whether you're a current trainee, whether you're applying for job applications? I think it is by starting to have some kind of profile on LinkedIn or whatever else that might be, but having something to say about yourself. You know, it starts to get people, like, get a feel for you, which I think is really important.
And it's quite nice to have a sort of creative outlet as well, because like sometimes in law, even though there are parts where being creative is a massive plus, sometimes you don't always feel like you're using that side of you. And I found that I learned quite a lot about like marketing and design and stuff by trying to make my own blog from scratch, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. But then someone recommended I try Canva, and I started making little GIFs and images for my blogs just to make it more attractive. And I'm finding I'm learning a lot of skills that I never would have had before just by doing that. So yeah.
And I mean, I think the takeaway is, you know, whether you feel like, yes, I'm going to really niche in on a certain area of law and I'm going to start a blog about it, whether that feels right to you, or whether it does just feel, you know, sharing your company article, like the articles that your firm's kind of putting out, but just having some kind of opinion on it, it is sort of a good way to start making genuine connections with people, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there who want to start being more active and don't know how to. So you're not the only one. And maybe by encouraging dialogue, some of those other people who are feeling the exact same way as you feel more comfortable in sort of commenting and liking and sharing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that lawyers are a bit behind on LinkedIn. I see a lot of people in different industries who are doing fabulous things, and I think we're just a bit reticent to put ourselves out there in the way that other industries are.
Risk averse, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned your dad, and I
Mhm.
know that, you know, at the start of this year, you actually found your kind of personal and professional worlds colliding in a way that you probably never anticipated. I wonder if you'd be able to share that story a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So at the start of the year, it was actually as we were starting our sort of internal NQ processes, so jobs were coming out, and I was starting to think about where I'd like to qualify. And then my dad had a massive brain hemorrhage. So I remember I was in the office and I'd spoken to my mum on my lunch break, and then she kept calling me at about 2, and I thought, that's weird, I've only just spoken to you. And she texted me saying, ring me urgently. So I sort of said to my supervisor, I don't normally look at my phone in work, but I'm a bit worried, can I go call her? And he was like, yeah, of course. So I spoke to her and she said that, look, your dad's been rushed into hospital. We don't really know what it is yet, but you know, it seems bad. So I sort of sat there not really knowing how bad it was and whether I should get on the train and go home to Wales or not. But my supervisor was really great. He was just like, look, Annie, go. He booked a taxi for me and they took me to the train station. Um, so yeah, they were really supportive. But the next few days were sort of a bit of a blur because we were very close to losing him, and we sort of had to prepare ourselves for that. But I think what I found quite weird was that as he was starting to go into recovery then, so he had a major brain operation and he was in intensive care for a couple of weeks, I tried to go back to work way too early. So I tried to literally go back to, to after the weekend of it happening. And I was no use to anyone. I don't know why I even thought it would be a good idea, because I just couldn't stop crying, or and that's always embarrassing anyway, to cry in the workplace, isn't it? Because I feel like it shouldn't be, but everyone does kind of feel like it's not very professional to show emotion.
You do kind of feel like you have to keep your personal life very separate from your professional life, and although there's an overlap, there's
Hmm.
almost like, but you don't really speak about it, or you don't show emotion
Yeah.
about it. So maybe you could say, you know, this has happened, but not to kind of be overly emotional. I think, yeah,
Yeah, in law, I feel like you feel like you've got to have a bit of a veneer, even if you don't really. It's kind of what you think is right. And yeah, so I remember sort of speaking to my boss, and he was really supportive, and he was just like, look, just have a think about whether you're actually ready to be here yet. And I kind of thought, no, I'm not.
yeah,
So I went home and I took some proper time and I saw my doctor, and yeah, just made sure that I was well enough to get back. But I found it quite hard because there wasn't really much written about it, or no one had spoken about it. And I mean, because you've done a training contract before, it's tough anyway. Like, it's a really tough job and you're always learning. And to do that when you're also going through something completely life changing at home was really tough. And I mean, he's still going through the recovery now. And there was a period where I was sort of commuting from the Bristol office from home. So I'd get up at, 4 or 5 in the morning, catch the train, do a full day, come back, and then try and help my mum who's in bits, and it was a lot. So I think that was one thing I also wanted to talk about, is that it's okay to, you know, not always be the best version of yourself, and it's okay to take time out when you need it.
yeah.
So yeah.
This is obviously something, I mean, I can really resonate with. So when I don't know if listeners probably don't know my background, but when I joined Slaughter May, as a trainee, I found out that my dad had just been diagnosed with terminal illness, motor neuron disease, which was really, really difficult because he was in Aberdeen, which is quite
Yeah.
far away from London. So I feel you're commuting as well. And I was really torn about what to do. But what he wanted me to do was to carry on my traineeship. And we were kind of told, you know, he's probably going to have about 2 to 5 years. But it became very apparent very quickly that that wasn't the case. And it was going downhill quite quickly. And I got to a certain, you know, every weekend. So I'd be in London during the week doing my do my training contract, and I would on a Friday night get the mega bus home for 12 hours because I never knew I was definitely going to be able to make that last flight, and I didn't want it to hinder my traineeship at all. So I knew if I got the bus at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, I'd be done by then, as compared to every weekend having to rush off at 5 p.m. And just feeling like I was kind of letting the side down, which in retrospect is madness, isn't it? But, you know, I was so keen to show that I was capable, that I was committed, that I was, you know, able to be there and worthy of being there. And then there came to a certain point where it became obvious that things were, you know, kind of really getting quite serious, and he had to go into a hospice. And at that point, I was actually in kind of similar to you in that you were kind of going through that qualification, you know, kind of looking at your final seat qualification application setting. I was actually in a department that I really would have liked to have qualified into. So I had then made a call of actually stepping away from my traineeship, going and spending time with him, and he, you know, passed away. So then I had to go back to the law firm, and they were very kindly let me go back into the department that I'd been in previously that I wanted to qualify into. But like you know, I couldn't function. I just lost my dad, but I still wanted to show that I was there, I was involved, and I was, you know, but it was just such a challenging time. And I think, yeah, I do really, you know, feel for you in terms of how you try and balance those two things, because it's difficult enough, as you said, as a trainee, and to kind of get about your daily challenges. You know, does your supervisor think you don't know what you're doing, or have you got a chance of qualifying into this department because this person seems to know far more than you? But when you have an additional layer on that, and whether it is something, you know, tragic like happened to us, or whether it's that you've got a relationship that's broke down, or you're having to move house, or, you know, you're just missing your family, especially during things like lockdown, I think it adds an additional layer that can really, you know, throw you in quite a way that you hadn't anticipated.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm similar to you. I was also in the department that I was going to apply to for an NQ job because I'd already been told there wouldn't be a family job due to some maternities in that department. They needed someone a lot more senior than me.
Yeah.
They ended up recruiting someone 8 years PQE, which is
Wow.
completely fair
Yeah.
enough. I couldn't compete. I was like,
Even with
ah,
your
okay.
blog.
Yeah. I was like, fair
You're
dues.
like, but have you seen my blog?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
go for
Like,
it.
I use Canva. Look at this
Yeah.
GIF. Yeah, there was no way I could compete with that. So I was going to go for litigation, and I was in litigation when this was all going on. And there was another trainee who was going for that job who had done her seat there before. And I just felt like every day I was letting people down because I felt like I was letting my family down when I was at work. And yet I felt like I was letting work down because I was worried about my family. And it just felt like you couldn't do right for doing wrong. And even little things, so like he was in the hospital for quite a while until we brought him home because of COVID. But even catching 4 trains a day felt like, well, what if I give something to my mum unwittingly, and then she goes and visits him and he gets it? And it was just all this sort of guilt that I was carrying, which is just it's just not sustainable. You're just going to burn out if you keep thinking those thoughts. So actually, yeah, now that I have sort of been able to take a step back from that and I've got my job sorted elsewhere, it's been quite a relief to just sort of actually have the time to process everything.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something people don't necessarily get either, is that if you've gone through a really traumatic, life-changing illness, even if they're recovering, you're still grieving your old life. So I went back to visit my family last weekend, and he's doing amazingly, but there's a hospital bed where the dining room used to be, and it's all these sort of things that just take quite a lot of getting used to. And even though I'm so happy with him and he's doing really well, I'm still grieving my dad that I knew before all of this. So yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
we spoke about that before we came on the call, actually, didn't we?
Mhm.
When I asked you what you'd been up to the weekend, and I had the kind of opposite way around, that, you know, you kind of, he's getting better, but I had this kind of gradual decline. And with motor neuron disease as well, it's a really terrific, you know, horrific disease that you almost become like trapped inside your body. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I just, seeing him vulnerable was really, really difficult, because it was like my dad was my dad, and it was kind of happening slowly, but it was like, whereas you had the kind of shock, the sudden kind of vulnerability that you saw, but you are trying to kind of deal with that different relationship from what you had before. And that kind of, like, it took a lot of my sense of security. Like, I knew where I stood in my family, that it was like my mum, my dad, they'd been together for like 30 years, me and my brother, and then everything got a little bit upside down. And then trying to kind of like, you know, I wouldn't say care about work, because that's wrong. Of course I cared. But when you've got something else going on, it's very difficult to care in the way that you previously
Mm-hmm.
did, if that makes sense. Would you agree with that? Or not care
Yeah.
about it, feel the same that you did, or like question whether it means as much as you thought it did. I'm kind of have completely confused what I was trying to say.
No, completely. It radically altered my perspectives on life, to be
That's
honest, because
basically exactly what I was trying to say. As I knew you'd do it better than I could. Put that in your Canva box.
yeah. Well, oh, thank you. I'll add that to the blog. But no, I think you're on a law path, and it's sort of, I've got to get my degree, and I've got to do well in that, and I've got to get the traineeship, and I've got to get the NQ job, and you're on this constant ladder, and then suddenly you realize how fragile life is, I guess, because I went from having quite a healthy family to that happening to my dad. My nan got diagnosed with MS. There was a lot going on, and suddenly I was thinking, obviously I knew that it mattered, and it still does to me, and my career is very important, but it just didn't feel like the be all and end all anymore. And I suddenly thought, actually being happy and healthy and all these things are so much more important than just how well I do in one seat, and whether I get an exceeds review, or, you know, all these silly little things that I used to worry about.
Yeah, I
Just
think it kind of takes it away from it just being about you, and also you start to
mhm.
be aware of like the impact you can have on other people. And as you said, like, it still matters, but that little mistake that you made, that before would have had you like thinking about it all weekend and what your supervisor thought of you kind of go, do you know what, I made a mistake.
Yeah,
I'm going to make sure I don't do that again, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to learn from it, in the way that it kind of, you just realize, like, in the bigger picture, it's not that important, as long as you're doing your best and you're not being negligible.
yeah.
You know, that was what it kind of did to me. It kind of just gave me that little shake that made me go, well,
Yeah, I'm a lot easier on myself now. I used to have quite perfectionist tendencies, I guess, and like I beat myself up if I got something wrong or didn't spot a typo, or and now I just kind of like you say, just kind of like, yeah, you know what? I'm human. I made that little mistake. I wasn't negligent. Phew.
yeah,
We can
always.
sort it. Yeah. Phew. It's fine, you know, life goes on. And so yeah, I if anything, although it was monumentally rubbish at the time, I do think I have learned a lot from it. Um, but I think it's nice that we have this opportunity to chat about it, because there wasn't really much out there. And I did actually know a trainee who'd lost someone whilst they were going through their first year, but no one really. It was quite a difficult thing to talk
Yeah,
about. So
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
was really excited to talk about it with you.
I was too, because I mean, this happened to, you know, my family over 10 years ago, and it's a big driver behind why I do what I do now. Because although I love being in the legal environment, after this had happened, like, I just really struggled to settle into it in the way that I maybe anticipated. And I stayed, you know, I qualified as a litigator, I stayed for a period of time, but I just became really passionate about other things on the side of that. And one thing that I was really passionate about was a kind of creating a space for like openness around about mental health and resilience, and, you know, just emotions within the legal industry. So I was really excited to speak to you about this, because like you, although everyone was very sympathetic and very understanding of what I was going through, and made really good, you know, kind of like made such an effort with me to make sure I was okay, I still felt like it wasn't really okay for me to be upset.
Yeah.
Maybe, especially like on a day-to-day basis, when I was like, I just lost my dad, you know, and then got back to work. Maybe I think because I actually stepped out of my department, and then went back in, and I kind of took a step back and actually went into the previous intake because I wanted to go back to, so that was a big decision to make, but it meant I actually had about 6-7 weeks off. I didn't just kind of go straight back to work, but everyone was great, but I wasn't okay. I probably wasn't okay for about 2 years, to be completely honest. But people
Yeah.
just don't speak about it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's good that you knew to take some time off. I mean, probably nowhere near as much as you need in that situation. But yeah, I mean, why I thought it would be a good idea to just try and go back into it. And my team were brilliant. They were just sort of like, go home, didn't pressure me. But I also found that I was quite angry as
Yeah.
well, which I think took me by surprise. I mean, I found myself being sort of resentful of things, and if someone who didn't know the situation had like emailed me chasing something, I'd be like, well, don't you know that my dad, and of course they didn't. But I remember thinking like just being a bit frustrated, and I think that takes quite a lot of time to sort of accept, like, because it didn't feel fair. He's in his early 50s, he's got 2 teenage sons, like, he was always quite a stoic, strong man. I was like, why has this happened to him? So yeah, and like I say, he is doing well. It's just still quite a lot, I guess, and especially with this lockdown, I feel like so many people are going through so much, and everyone's like a bit afraid to say, actually, I'm not doing my best at the moment. I don't feel so great.
Do you think that lockdowns kind of gave us a little insight into other people's lives in the way that we maybe didn't before? So it's kind of almost taken, like, I think, like, very much before you had like your professional face and this is it, and like no one knew what your living room looked like or your kitchen table, or the fact that you had 2 dogs and a budgie me, or like, a child or whatever it would be, and that they were really running in when you were doing meetings. Like, nobody saw that side of their colleagues, whereas now we have. So I hope going forward that these conversations are slightly easier, because we've all kind of been thrust into everyone, our colleagues' personal lives in a way that we probably wouldn't have ever opened up about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my colleagues of the time I went home have heard my mum singing loudly while I'm trying to discuss an important claim, and I'm there like, mum, like. And I've seen their, washing pile on the tables and things like that. And it's nice because before, yeah, there was this veneer. But I also think it is quite hard for juniors with all this remote working to sort of put their hand up and be like, I'm a bit lonely, or I'm struggling a bit with this, because it's sometimes a lot more daunting to pick up the phone to ask a silly question than it is to turn over when you can see what they're doing. So
even that turnover, it would take you about 15 minutes of like checking over your shoulder,
psyching yourself up.
And then when they go out, you're like, oh, it was just the way to ask you. I built up the confidence. So yeah, I do see that we've as a company and as a coach as well, junior members of the team have definitely been the people that are most affected, as that kind of informal support's taken away, as well as the kind of formal structures, or maybe they've still got their supervisor and their supervisor's doing very, very well at supporting or giving feedback, but it's all the little bits that you build up in the office environment, isn't it? Like the chatting to your secretary, or them giving you a little insight as to, you did this way, but actually you could do it that way, or whatever that might be. Asking one of the junior members of your team for a little bit of guidance, rather than feeling you've got to go to the partner that you're doing the piece of work for.
Yeah,
so,
definitely. And I found it really weird. I miss people that my work path never really crossed with. I didn't work with them, but I'd always chat to them in the kitchen. And it's like, I find that it's quite hard for juniors, because often our sort of family relationships aren't quite as established. Typically don't tend to be, sort of married with kids. So you make quite a lot of friends in the workplace, and it's harder to do that remotely. I mean, obviously I'm making my LinkedIn friends, but
obviously calling every week, how are you doing? No, definitely, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, it's just difficult, isn't it? And I do think that this has kind of been an opportunity that obviously mine and your kind of personal and professional lives collided in a way that I can only hope for other people it doesn't happen. But I do think, like, for many people during lockdown, they've probably seen that to a certain extent. And is there anything you would kind of, not advice you've given anyone, but kind of how did you find that balance and prioritize when you were, you know, commuting and when you had other things on your mind? Like, how did you make it work on a daily basis?
Oh, sorry, before lockdown with
Yeah,
everything.
when everything initially happened with your dad. Sorry, I like jumped back there.
No, no, that's fine. To be honest, I'm not sure I did.
Yeah.
Looking back, I'm not sure I was functioning that well. And I think it's only been since lockdown that I've actually had some time to sort of process everything that was going on with Nan's a mess and Dad's illness, that I've actually been able to be like, oh, okay, like I feel a bit human again, and I don't think I was doing so well before. Because I do think mental health is quite a hard thing to talk about in law, especially. I mean, it's much better than it probably was 10,
Over
20
my
years ago.
day, yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't, but just to confirm, I wasn't 20 years ago.
No,
Not,
I
that was
wasn't
not
saying
being
you.
kind to me, but not that long.
No, I wasn't saying you.
No, no, no,
But
I know.
but like, yeah, I still think it's quite hard for trainees to say like, I'm actually not doing so well, you know. So I'm personally on antidepressants, and it's not something that I've ever really told my supervisors
Mm,
that I can remember, because it's just, I don't, even though I know that they would never judge me, it's that
yeah,
kind of, you just feel a bit sort of
stigma.
vulnerable about it. Yeah, and you shouldn't be, because if you took something for any other ailment, like if I was diabetic and I took insulin, no one
Mm.
would think anything of it. So
Definitely, definitely, yeah.
yeah.
And I'm you know, really grateful for you sharing that, because it is, you know, a big thing to kind of say when in the legal industry it's very much, you know, we don't talk about stuff like that. And you know, for me, when my dad was ill, I was suffering really badly from panic attacks, and I think it was just the uncertainty and the traveling and being tired and trying to impress. It was so much that I was having really bad panic attacks, and just not knowing who I could reach to at that point, because it just felt like, not only am I the trainee that's standing up like a sore thumb for numerous reasons anyway, I felt like I had really bad imposter syndrome because I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge, and you know, I had it in my head like, oh, I'm at Magic Circle Law Firm and everyone's going to be questioning why I'm there. And then obviously my dad, and then I was having panic attacks as well. It was like, I did just want to add another thing to my tick box of why I was different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I can completely get that. Yeah. It's it's a really hard one to sort of touch on, especially if you don't feel like you're the right fit maybe where you are. I think it can be really difficult to sort of say, oh, and this, you know. Like, I'm the one that wears the big false eyelashes. Oh, and I'm on antidepressants.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I completely get that, and I think that's why for a while I kind of tried to struggle on when I shouldn't have. But now I'm kind of learning that that's never going to work. That's the way you're going to burn out, you know, if you carry on trying to go a full pelt. And the imposter syndrome thing really resonates with me because you know, I grew up in a village called Llanbraddock that no one's ever heard of, and I was very similar. In fact, I remember on one of my first paralegal jobs, if I went home without having sent an email, I'd be panicking in the night, like, oh, what if, you know, my supervisor realizes I didn't send that out today, and then they think I'm rubbish, and if I like ridiculous thoughts that I knew weren't rational, but that I just couldn't stop getting. And I do think it is hard, especially if you go to a university where it feels like everyone is sort of private schooled, because they have this confidence that you just don't get in state school. And I would try and emulate it, but I never really felt it until I sort of got a bit older and felt a bit more
Yeah.
comfortable in my skin, I guess.
Yeah, and I suppose the interesting thing is, though, you know, you can be privately schooled, you can have gone to Oxford, Cambridge, and you probably have exactly the same panic about, did I
Mm-hmm.
send that email, or did my supervisor think that I did well today, or anything. So I don't necessarily think, actually, although we and you and myself probably start to be like, oh, maybe it's because of this that I'm feeling like I don't fit in, or maybe it's because of this. It's like, well, no, we applied for the job in the same way that everyone else did, and they deemed us like, yes, come and join us.
Yeah.
So we're obviously worthy of being at whatever law firm that might be, whether that's Foot Anstey, whether it's Law Tremay that I was at. And on a daily basis, I didn't feel that I didn't fit in, or people didn't think I fitted in. but I had it in my head. And,
Yeah.
a lot of that I think was just imposter syndrome and just kind of being a little bit overwhelmed with everything that was going on. That in the same way that I think anyone can, whatever your education, whatever your background, whether you came from a tiny little town in Wales or, I do think it's a natural process of entering a very competitive, very high paced industry as a very driven, ambitious individual, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I will be honest. I mean, growing up in Lambraddock had great advantages for me. I got something called the Access to Exeter bursary, where I
Mm,
got like an extra 3 grand a year. So I did have a lot of help.
yeah.
And I'm not sure if I would have got that if it wasn't for my parents' earnings and things. And actually, I knew quite a lot of people whose parents had good salaries, but not enough to support them, and the
Mm,
student funding was nowhere near as much as I got, for example. So there's
mm,
been quite a lot of examples where I guess I've had some quite positive treatment
yeah.
because of where I've come from. And I
Mm,
think it's important to recognise that too, because,
yeah. I can
yeah.
tell you something really sickening that's going to make everyone hate me. I went to uni in Scotland when tuition fees wasn't a thing.
Oh,
I
nice.
know, right? And I lived at home.
Yeah. Well, I was on
Uni
the,
wasn't far from me, so I could tell everyone has just like clicked me off. They're like, "Oh
yeah,
my god,
like,
you don't
oh
even know
God.
about student debt I've got." Yeah, I suppose you've got to take it as swings and roundabouts, right? That like your particular circumstances make you you, and there's benefits to that, there's negatives to it, but it's how you use it and how you go forward and stuff. So just being aware of those things.
Yeah, I was sort of similarly resented in that because I was Welsh, I had the £3,500 tuition fees, whereas everyone else on my course was paying 9,000, and they were kind of like, "What?" And I'd be like,
No,
"Yeah,
well,
sorry." Yeah, I know. But
amazing. I do. I mean, I really appreciate you being so like open and honest about the situation you found yourself in, and it's also been really nice for me to be able to talk about what I went through, whilst I was a trainee as well, because it has always made me really passionate about creating a bit of a safe space for people to talk about the challenges that they face. So when I do like trainee resilience sessions, I always kind of make a real point of giving people the opportunity to speak about the challenges they're facing in their role, but also if there's anything else as well. And I'm quite open about my story because I never used to be. And when I first started, I kind of really kept it quiet, didn't say anything. And then recently, like especially over the last 2 years, I've started speaking about it a lot more because I realized that not everyone has that normal 2 year traineeship. Like I didn't qualify at the same time as my intake. I was 6 months behind everyone. And that was really hard because then I just felt really like disjointed from everything else. That when everyone else was celebrating their NQ roles, like I was kind of in this trainee intake that I didn't even know anyone because I came back into it in my third seat. So they were quite bonded by then. And I just felt like I had a bit of loose end. So I think it's, really good that we do talk about when people have slightly alternative career paths, even the fact that you've trained somewhere and you're going on to qualify somewhere else. Again, it's just
Yeah.
not something we speak about.
Yeah, I feel like law firms love to talk about resilience as the sort of end product, because obviously lawyers kind of need to be resilient and it's a brilliant thing to have. But I think because building resilience can be quite ugly or hard or emotional, people don't like to talk about how they built that resilience.
Very good, fair point.
Like, I remember having this conversation with somebody at HR who's lovely, saying, "Oh, but think how character building everything you've gone through is." I was like, "I've got enough character. Can we
Yeah,
stop now? If anything, I've got too much." If life could
I'm
just
gonna change
be,
it to LinkedIn.
if life could just be plain sailing from now on, that would be great. Because I don't need no more character. Thank you. Yeah.
I agree. I must say, like the people, I was so lucky as well. The people around me, and especially in HR and graduate recruitment departments, whilst I was there, they were just absolutely phenomenal and offering me
Mhm.
that support. And even I remember when my dad passed away, they sent me this huge bouquet of flowers that still like touches my heart a little bit that they actually did that and they didn't have to do
Yeah.
that. So yeah, I hear you. Like having, I think you often start to develop those personal relationships in a way that you maybe hadn't anticipated. And although it's coming from the result of something really awful happening, it can sometimes make real genuine connections. Like there's people that I still speak to now that supported me through that journey whilst I was a trainee. That I
Yeah.
probably, they wouldn't remember who I was if this hadn't happened. They wouldn't be interested in what I was doing now, or maybe they would, but not maybe, you know, so lovely about it.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, isn't it? How actually your journey is your journey, and you just have to go with it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's been like 6, 7 months now, and people are still, how's your dad? And oh, I heard he's walking now, and that's brilliant. And you know, and people do genuinely care, and it's been really touching. And I think that's why in one way I am a bit sad to leave, because my sort of colleagues were great with it all. Um, but yeah, I guess it's just life, isn't it? And it is, there are silver linings to everything, even when it feels really rubbish at the time, even if it's something really tragic. You do start to see sort of the positives in the situation. Like my dad, yeah, he's got a long way to go in his recovery, but he's doing really well. His personality hasn't changed much. I mean, we could be talking about someone who didn't know who we were, and we're not, you know. So I feel very lucky. He still sort of cracks jokes, and yeah, so he's great. I mean, he like was walking yesterday, and he was saying, "Oh, I'll be moonwalking next," and I feel two again and stuff. So
Amazing.
yeah, so
Amazing.
he's very much still him, and I think you've got to count your blessings sometimes and think it could have been a lot worse. Although it is hard to say that to him, obviously,
Yeah, of
because
course. Yeah, for when you're
yeah.
all things do now. Um, Thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to know, I always end the podcast with a couple of questions. The first thing I'd love to know, and you touched upon this a little bit, is what does resilience mean to you?
Definitely. I think resilience is sort of the inner strength to keep going when you have really rubbish things sliding your way, and the sort of self-worth and self-belief that you can get through those obstacles. That's what it's kind of become for me. And there's been a few times where I felt like packing it all in because as much as I love it, and I do want to get that across, I do love law, I love my job, but sometimes I do kind of think, oh, is this for me? Am I in the
Am
right
I going to put
place?
myself through this?
Yeah. That sort of self-belief of, well, look how far I've already come, look at all the things I have gone through, um, kind of kept me going. So yeah, that's how I kind of define it. It's the sort of inner strength I think you develop as a result of either adversity or just really pants things happening in your life.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
The other thing I always ask people as well is, what's your number one tip for sustainable success within the legal industry?
Um, I think being kind to yourself. I know people say, oh, be kind. There's a lot of emphasis on that. But I just think you really do have to back yourself in this profession. I think for quite a long while I was sort of very hard on myself, and now I'm learning to just think, actually, look how far you've come, look what you've achieved, stop being your own biggest critic, that, and also update your trainee log as you go, because I wish I'd done that, and now I'm coming to
Brilliant.
qualification and I'm there trying to furiously enter entries. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my other tip for success.
Yeah, a very deep and meaningful one, and then like a practical life skill
Yeah.
that you need to do.
Update that log.
Yeah, it used to be like every Friday afternoon I'd be like, right, I'm gonna do it, and then it would be like, okay, it never happened. And then we
Yeah, because work just gets in the way, and then suddenly I'm looking back at what I did in September 2018, like, oh.
wow, you've got some work to do this
I
afternoon.
do, yeah.
Well done. And final thing I'd love to know is, who inspires you within the legal industry and you think would make a great guest on the podcast?
Yeah, so I think Alice Stevenson is really cool. I've never met her, so I'm going to sound like a complete fangirl now.
Well, I've done
Not
and I
speaking.
also know who she is because of LinkedIn, so this
Yeah,
is even more cringe for me. I maybe need to go on a different social media.
yeah, same. I spend all my life on LinkedIn now. I don't even look at Instagram or anything. So yeah, she's so cool. I mean, she set up her own law firm, and I think she's moving to Amsterdam, and she has quite a lot of tattoos, and she's quite open about that. And she's just really someone who I think is very authentic, and that's quite inspiring in law, to see people be unashamedly themselves. So
Yeah.
I would follow her, definitely.
Yeah, amazing. And I think to be authentic and to still be really, achieving incredible things as well. So it's the things that all of us are so scared about being open about, whether that's having a personality, and especially a kind of a social media kind of profile. You've shown us it works, and you can do it and still have the success. And with her, it is really kind of living your own journey as well. I think she's really inspirational in that way. So I'll definitely get in touch with her and ask
Yeah,
her to be on.
I'd
We'll
love to
dedicate it
watch
to
her
you.
one. Thank
It'll
you.
be my birthday gift to
Yeah.
you for being birthday.
Such a
Um,
fangirl, but
I know. I really, really appreciate you, speaking so openly about your journey, both into law and, the way that you kind of got into the legal industry and everything that happened with your dad. And I'm so, so glad. I'm so glad that he's, getting better and improving on a daily
thank
basis. So
you.
you'll have to send
Yeah,
him all my love. But,
he's awesome.
I would say as well, please, everyone listening to the podcast, go and follow Annie Joseph on LinkedIn. She's phenomenal, and
Hi.
look at her blog as well. She spends a lot of time on Canva. Everyone's going to be like, what is Canva? It's basically a marketing tool
Yeah.
that for people who are, I mean, I'm so uncreative that, like, visually uncreative. I'm like, ah! So Canva is a dream because you can edit things and it's got all these templates. It's amazing.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I spent a lot of time there over the weekend looking at doing some slides and then got overwhelmed by it and it just came off and did some plain ones. I was like, oh, so I'm still a lawyer at heart. So please do follow Annie. I think you'll absolutely love all of her content, all of her blogs. And it's just so nice to see someone being so authentically themselves. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's
No
brilliant.
worries. The final thing I wanted to say to everyone was, please do sign up on our website at leadingmindsglobal.com. On the podcast page, you can subscribe to our weekly podcast and you'll be automatically sent an update. And please do as well follow us on LinkedIn. We've got a whole host of motivation and tips for sustainable success on our page. So thank you so much.